So, it begins. Dark were the skies and chill was the wind as the land was covered in a veil of malice. Across the hill did ride a dread army of the night, cloaked in mist and fog, prepared to rain down death and destruction upon the land. And the people cried out for a savior, a noble soul to save them from their impending demise. Just as it seemed all was lost, in strode a mighty hero, clad in shimmering metal from head to toe. Wielding a terrible broadsword, he did cleave his foes in twain, smashing their ranks asunder with a righteous fury. And when the day was done, and the enemy strewn across the fields in pieces, the people did turn to the warrior and say, "We shall name this day in your honor. Speak unto us your wisdom." Slowly the warrior turned to face the assembled crowd. Lifting his sword on high, he said but one word that day. One man, one murloc, one giant angry badger. This is Blue Plz. It begins now.
Yes, indeed, folks. Welcome to Blue Plz right here on cynicalbrit.com with myself, TotalBiscuit. The date today is the 29th of April, 2011. It is 8 p.m. in the British Isles. Some of you might know our country by the fact that we're all flipping out over a goddamn wedding. I never, sadly, had any claim to the fact that our country was smart. No. We're talking about the same country, by the way, that will repeatedly buy newspapers for the sole reason that it's talking about an ex-glamour model that has actually done nothing worthwhile in her entire life. Yes. Those of you in the British Isles know who I'm talking about. Those who do not are probably, just maybe aware of somebody by the name of Katie Price. Yes, another Kate that we can't seem to get our goddamn eyes off of. I have to know why that is. It is kind of sad. But that is the case. People like dumb stuff. But there you go. We will not talk any more else about it, as far as I'm concerned. There was no need, no reason, no rhyme. So, what exactly is going on in this particular show? I shall let you know. It rhymes, oh my god. I was lying when I said there was no rhyme. There is, in fact, several. So, what's coming up the show for you today? Well, conquest points changed to PvP. Everything's been flattened out, much to the disgust of a lot of people, and I had a word with a PvPer, in fact. He goes by the name of Belligerent. You might know him. He's a very highly ranked arena player. He's also part of the game station. So I'm having a discussion with him, and we're going to talk about the conquest points change later on the show. And also from the perspective of a PvE player, why exactly I don't really care if things are balanced between PvP and PvE, and I'm alright with spending longer to get my gear than they have to spend in order to get theirs. Also, 4.2, looking to be a story-driven epic by the looks of it, will be analysing the recent preview content that's come out for this particular set of patches, and it's going to be in regards to the Mount Hyjal restoration as well as the Firelands and the legendary content, and we'll be thinking about whether or not that's actually enough and if it's a good direction to take that particular patch. Also, 4.2 as well, why 7 bosses just isn't enough, and we'll be talking about the lackluster raid content going forward and the idea of single tier raiding and small numbers of encounters somehow being okay, and whether or not heroic content is really a substitute for actually having lots of bosses. And your chance to contribute to the show, folks. You can email into themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com with the illusion of choice. Yes, indeed, folks. The illusion of choice. Email themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com. Now, there will be a guest on next week's show. In fact, there'll be 2 of them. The guys from the Daily Blink are going to be coming on for a half-interview, half-guest hosting segment, whereby they will be discussing various things. We're just going to have a chat, really. Sounds reasonable. I like the Daily Blink. The Daily Blink is pretty much the comic version of what Nubcake News used to be, by the way. So, I like them. I get along very well with them. We share fairly similar views, so we will be doing that. And sadly, people still don't understand that the show is an audio podcast. Why is the video not on? My God, learn to read. I mean, I would perhaps forgive people if it wasn't written on the live stream page. The video is not part of Blue Plz. Here are the instructions. I not read. And I consistently wonder why people concern themselves with dumb stuff, when in reality we have people like this. Oh my. Oh my. Oh my. Ugh. Horrendous. Absolutely, completely, and totally horrendous. I swear, some people, why you no read? Okay, so what else is going on this week? Azeroth Daily will be coming out a little bit later. That's going to be coming out, hopefully, after the show. Give me about an hour or so afterwards. I've pretty much done the recording. I just need to edit it together, so that should be fine. It's kind of my own fault, really. I decided to get embroiled in an argument with an MMO champion. It's like, oh, this is like the good old days. Yes, the good old days where I used to get involved in the forums and shout at people. Now it's just on the MMO champion forum. It was, amusingly, kind of the same thing that we've discussed in the past, and also that keeps coming up, the idea that somehow 4.1 is not a lackluster patch. I don't really want to discuss that all that much on the show, because as far as I'm concerned, it's self-evident to anyone with a working cerebellum. I can't see why anyone can think otherwise. I mean, we had some guys say, oh, well, that's just like your opinion, man. That's not really a fact. yeah, it is a fact. Oh, man. Seriously, have a look at what 4.1 has in comparison to 3, 2, and 1.1. Oh, yes, I remember 1.1. Some guy actually argued that 1.1 wasn't a significant patch. Yeah, you're right, it wasn't a significant patch. It only introduced the first ever raid dungeons into the game and all the racials for every race. Yeah, definitely nothing in that patch whatsoever of worth. Yeah, Molten Corvin and Nixia, definitely not important content right there. Let's not even get started on 2.1. I mean, I'll be honest, looking up until this point, with more and more stuff coming out for 4.2, I'm thinking it's looking like a significantly better patch. It's just they're slacking on the raid content side of things, but everything else, I mean, I like the idea of this whole restoration thing, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the show, although I'm still seeing no Abyssal Maw being announced. Where the hell did the Abyssal Maw go exactly? Was it some kind of underwater whirlpool? It's a possibility. Is it, in fact, being hidden inside the companion cube? Who knows? Who knows? Whatever the case, folks, I would like to bring you mail time, but since we've actually been off the air for 2 weeks, it's a little bit tricky to do just that. So I'm not going to be able to do that, so I'm just going to do some more talking. In fact, I'm going to talk about this MMO champion thread, just because it seems kind of worthwhile. So this MMO champion thread brought up a whole bunch of different things. It was a nice little hodgepodge of content, and the guy that posted it, sadly, is an Azeroth Daily viewer, but he didn't really express his opinion in the best way. For instance, he made no less than 3 spelling mistakes while attempting to type TotalBiscuit, which is a little bit embarrassing, honestly. I would hope that my fans would be a little smarter than that, but every now and again, you do find people that are just kind of awful. I don't know. I think it's maybe the fact that some of my demographic is quite young, so you got 12, 13-year-olds watching the show. They're not the primary demographic for the show, that's 18 to 24-year-olds, as according to the YouTube stats, but still. The issues that were brought up were 4.1, and were also, I think maybe the most important thing that was brought up is the whole love it or leave it argument. That's the worst thing. By far, the worst thing. Why would people have this attitude? The reason that people criticize the game is because they actually really like the game and they want it to be better. Now, sometimes that criticism is completely misguided. But every single time you get a criticism like that, that is the reasoning behind it. It's just a lot of it is kind of rubbish. For instance, you're talking about very subjective ideas of what the game should be. I mean, even the people that demand nerfs actually want the game to be better, it's just their idea of the game being better is not in line with how games should actually work. And we're talking about, of course, risk-reward and the challenge curve. If games don't have either of these things, then they cease to be a suitably challenging product, and that actually turns off more people than it turns onto it. There must be a challenge. People naturally seek a challenge one way or the other, to varying degrees. The idea that somebody should just quit the game immediately if they don't like it is, as far as I'm concerned, logically fallacious. Sure, absolutely, unsub from the game if you're not having fun. I think that's perhaps the most important thing. But if there are elements of the game that you don't like, and yet you're still playing the game for whatever reason, whether or not it be a social reason as part of your guild, whether or not it simply be down to the fact that you like some elements of the game but not others, you should absolutely raise your voice and let people know exactly what you think is wrong with it. The thing is, Blizzard does listen, and it doesn't even come down to vocal minorities either. If they think something is a good idea, they will actually make the change. The problem is that when they see stuff like, this content is too hard, and then they can back it up by looking at stats that say not enough people have done this content, and that's how they interpret those statistics. And if I'm honest, I don't think that's correct. A lot of the time, I really don't think that's why people don't do the content. I think there are other reasons, and we'll be talking about that particularly in relation to heroic content later on in the show. But when it comes to expressing your dislike for an element of the game, this is a community-driven game, and it has a very significant community presence, and indeed, as far as I'm concerned, the presence of the community is what causes the game to exist in its current strong state. I don't know if anyone would really dispute that. I think that if you have a look at the amount of different fringe communities that have sprung up around this game, and I don't think that playing WoW puts you in as part of a community, but there are a lot of other sub-communities that gather around the fact that they play World of Warcraft, and that to me is a fairly important thing to bear in mind. If you look at the number and then you compare it to any other game, it is shocking. I think maybe the only game that perhaps has more these days is probably Minecraft, and whether or not Minecraft will actually last as long as World of Warcraft remains to be seen. We'll see whether or not that's the case, but then again, we're talking about a game that isn't even out yet, so God knows what will happen to it. But when you have that much community involvement, when you have entire websites dedicated to hosting the tens of thousands of user interface modifications that are being created for the game, when you have sites dedicated to very specific elements of the game, like there are sites dedicated to one class, you know? There are, and that's kind of terrifying when you think about it. There are multiple sites dedicated to one class. That's pretty crazy. There are massive PvP communities, massive raiding communities. Oh, please. It's kind of terrifying when you think about it. And as a result of that, what you can't do is to throw away the whole idea that it's okay to just disregard people's criticism of the game and sideline it and ostracize it and marginalize it as some kind of butthurt QQ, because that's not in reality what it is. There is some of it, certainly, then there is an element to that, but always the intention is to make the game better in the perception of the player in question. And I think these status quo guys and the White Knights are actually the most damaging element of this community. I really, really do. If you read that thread, and I can give you a link if you like, actually, I would encourage people not to flame in this under any circumstances, because I think it's a reasonable discussion. I just think that some people are, without question, taking it completely overboard. And this was specifically on the subject of lack of content. So I'll give you a link to this in the channel, if I can find the sodding thing, which I now inexplicably cannot, unless it's been gotten rid of off the forums. That was weird. I mean, I stumbled across it on the forums earlier and now can't find it. I have to wonder if it's been deleted, so, well, maybe it has. Whatever the case, I can summarize it simply by saying it was about the lack of content in 4.1 and the possibility that content patches are actually slowing down in terms of the amount of content they bring. Now, I think that when I said that yesterday, since that was before all of this preview content about 4.2, which is actually looking pretty good, even though it's not actually raid content, I think that you can't really take that statement that I made on, say, yesterday's As of Daily to heart on that basis, simply because circumstances have now immediately changed. Which is cool. There we go. I think I found the thread. Thanks to Novacus for actually providing that one on Twitter. I'm retweeting that right now. And as I've said before, do not take it as an opportunity to flame. For God's sake, try and keep the MMO Champion forums clean. Yes, Renee has just linked it in there. Also, people asking dumb questions in the channel. I'm doing a show. This is not a Q&A. Please GTFO. So, in that thread, you had so many people coming around and saying, basically, love it or leave it. It's like, well, no. I'll happily unsub, but that does not mean that I don't care about the game. I mean, I haven't played the game in months. Does that mean I don't care about the direction of the game? Hell no. Absolutely not. I definitely do. Because it's a game that I've put 5-6 years into, and you see a company like Blizzard that makes these amazing products, and you see them making missteps, and you know why, but it's the fact that Blizzard is kind of blind to the consequences of what they're doing. I mean, for instance, the badge change system, I feel, is the most, and you can see why they did it. You know, they did it with good intentions. It wasn't just down to, oh, we're just going to reward people. I think there was a element of that, certainly, that we want people to keep playing the game, and the way that we're actually going to do that is to ensure that players continuously get a steady drip feed of epic items, because there's a subset of the player base that cares for nothing but that. What it actually comes down to is that Blizzard wanted to make sure that people who came in late were not stuck outside of raiding. The thing is, there were better solutions. And I think that you've got a lot of people saying, oh, well, you know, Blizzard is always right, love it or leave it, which is wrong. And Blizzard is frequently incorrect. They frequently do things that either upset a subset of their player base or are just plain incorrect to the point where they have to apologize and make changes. We've already seen that, even in this whole PvP debacle, and I think that there's going to be further changes coming in. We'll be talking about that after the break. But I suppose the moral of this particular story is that dissent is a very, very healthy thing. No, not just the games, they're great too, but dissent from authority and actually talking about problems in a mature manner is okay, and people getting upset and overly emotional over it are the worst people in the world. They really, really are. They're the worst people in the world when it comes to helping the game get better. My name is TotalBiscuit. You listen to Blue Plz right here on cynicalbrit.com. I'll play some Pendulum because, hey, why not? That's the only drum and bass band, as far as I'm concerned, that is actually acceptable for a metal fan to play, because it's kind of a crossover there anyway. This goes by the name of the Vulture. I'll be right back after this to talk a little bit about the PvP changes with everything else. Enjoy. Yes, indeed, folks, you listen to Blue Plz right here on cynicalbrit.com with myself, TotalBiscuit. Since people cannot read on the internet, I have to point things out before I go into anything, which is, this show should never, ever, ever be taken seriously. It's as simple as that. It is a shock jock show. It is about as serious as the Colbert Report. There might be a point there, but I can guarantee that it will be buried in layers of sarcasm and overblown, exaggerated hyperbole. Which is fine, because this show is for entertainment purposes as well as to make you think and potentially outrage you to the point where you'll actually think of something yourself. It's as simple as that. Do not take this show as gospel, for God's sake. Seriously, I saw a thread on the forums that said, in the latest Blue Plz, TotalBiscuit said, stop right there. Stop right there. Do not cite Blue Plz as a source for anything. For like 5 years, it's been a shock jock show. Half the stuff I say is nonsense. Do you not understand this? I don't believe half of what I'm saying. I tell you this because it's entertainment. If you want to hear what I actually believe, Azeroth Daily is accurate. Yeah? I keep that accurate. This is a shock jock show. That's what shock jocks are actually all about. The exception being that I actually freely admit that what I'm talking about I don't really believe in, whereas shock jocks in the States actually do pretend. Yes, it's kind of sad, really, isn't it? Okay, with that out of the way, and with a proper disclaimer, let's continue. There's been a recent change to PvP that has got a lot of people up in arms, and I want to actually tackle a few parts of it. So, the change is as follows. The way that things used to work in terms of the earning of conquest points used to be you earned a certain amount of conquest points at the end of each week in relation to your MMR. And that was the same as arena points back in the day, but they've merged them together now, so all PvP points are pretty much the same. You've got Honor and you've got Conquest. Now, what they've done at this point is change it so that the MMR has actually nothing to do with it whatsoever. So your MMR ranking used to affect the number you got, and now it's simply due to you have to win a certain number of games in order to reach Honor cap, and it's related to how many you have. I mean, if you look at the amount that you get, I think, did they change it? They did. They've actually been changing it quite a few times recently. I'm going to go and have a quick look through my old Azeroth daily notes, because they should tell me what they currently have it as. I think perhaps this is the most important thing to bear in mind, that they have already changed it once, and they're very likely to change it again. I think the problem that I've got with it, more so than the amount, is actually the philosophy behind it, which seems to be deeply, deeply flawed. We will find out. It wasn't that one. I think it was the day before that, actually. In fact, I'm almost certain that it was. Ah, here we go. Yes. So, what there was in patch 4.1 is the fact that every time you did a win, you got 135 conquest points. And every time you won a rated battleground, you got 335. That's now been up to 180 and 400. And the cap is significantly higher than that. So, you're talking about a cap of 3,000, if I recall correctly. So, you can do the basic mathematics on that one as to how many games you will actually have to play in order to get to that point. Now, here's the thing. That has meant that a lot of people have had to play. In fact, almost everybody is having to play more games. So, it's kind of a two-tiered thing. What you're not seeing is a lot of people objecting to the fact that, oh, why does my MMR not matter anymore? I should get rewarded more if I'm a higher MMR. You're not actually seeing a lot of people say that. Now, no doubt a few people are. I would imagine certainly on the higher spec kind of places like Arena Junkies that are very serious about their PvP, but from browsing through the Battle.net forums, I'm not seeing a lot of that. Which is actually kind of alright. No doubt, while some people object to that, I think the vast majority of people do realize that getting gear quicker for being a higher MMR doesn't really make a lot of sense, because it has this whole rich get richer, poorer get poorer kind of thing. This is the thing that's been broken about arenas for a very long time, to the point where I drew up a massive manifesto on a new arena system a very, very long time ago. I have to wonder if I still have it. I don't know if I put it up on my old blog spot. I don't think I did. Not as far as I'm aware. I'm just looking through some blogs that I put together for this. Older posts. Do I have anything on PvP? No, not by the looks of it. So this never went up on my old blog. But the basic idea of an old system that I had was to ensure that players all had an equal footing depending on what league they were in. It was a league-based PvP system, which is fine. It's totally and completely reasonable. Right now, you've got a system of PvP whereby gear matters, and to me that seems like it shouldn't be the case at any point. If you have a look at games like, I'm trying to think of some similar games. I mean, Bloodline Champions is probably the easiest comparison. Now, Bloodline Champions doesn't have gear in it at all. It comes down to simple arena matches between teams, and it comes down to what exactly your team is capable of doing. And I like Bloodline Champions in that way, but I'd like to compare arena to something a little bit different, and that's to Dota, Heroes of New Earth, or League of Legends. And I would compare that to that, because gear matters in those games as well. However, the gear gap only happens in the course of a game, which can last anywhere between about 15 to 30 to 40 minutes. But after that, the gear is reset. The difference with the seasons is that the season goes on for quite a long time, and the gear gap actually gets wider the further the season goes on. Now, to me, that is a massive problem, because if you haven't got those early wins, and you haven't got the lead in terms of the amount of points you got, then you don't really get to be competitive. Now, that has been changed with this patch, and I actually approve of this. I haven't heard of any PvPers really objecting to that specifically. It, more to the point, comes down to the number of conquest points that are actually earned, and this comes down to a completely different design philosophy. Now, this design philosophy is, in my opinion, heavily flawed. Zahim came up with this, and I'd like to read this for you. Goes like this. We saw that arenas and rated battlegrounds were over-rewarding players for the time investment required, particularly compared to point gains in PvE. We felt the change... We felt the change we went live with, we felt the change we went live with in the patch was a little bit too low and were overcompensating, so we buffed up the numbers for wins. So, I have a couple of problems with this. Now, I'm a purely PvE player. You know, obviously I haven't played in a little while, but when I used to play a lot, and obviously I did all the raid content in beta as well, so it's not like I don't know what I'm talking about. But it comes down to the fact that as a PvE player, I have one thing to say about PvP. I do not care. And that entails a whole bunch of different things. The two most important things to take from that statement are, I do not want PvP getting involved in any way in my PvE content. But the flip side of this, I do not want my PvE content affecting PvP content in any way. So, for instance, we take this idea that somehow the time difference in terms of investment between these two particular playstyles are too different. There's a wide gap, and PvE takes longer. Well, that doesn't matter. You want to know why it doesn't matter? Because PvP gear has nothing to do with me. I'm a raider. I have no desire to acquire PvP gear. If someone else has a full set of PvP gear and they've spent less time getting it than I spent getting my raid set, I don't care. Why? Because that PvP set is irrelevant to my PvE progress. The kind of thing that I would object to as a PvE player is if I were to see a guy, say, in a set of previous tier stuff that he got from 5-mans and he invested less time in. It doesn't bother me all that much, but it does annoy me a little bit. It irks me. I don't see why it wouldn't. Because I'm the kind of person that likes to think that people actually earn their stuff. Now, when it comes down to PvP, you cannot compare time. You can't. You just cannot do it. It's not the same thing. Raids go on for hours. Arena games go on for minutes. Unless, of course, it's 3 Resto Druids versus 3 Holy Paladins, in which case it might take a lot longer. You cannot, and I do mean you cannot, make a direct comparison, which means it's not okay and it's not fair to PvPers to make that kind of change. What it comes down to is the fact that now with this change, PvPers, particularly ones with alts, are having to do a ton more games in order to reach the cap. Now, there are two sides to this, and it's why I actually think that both of these sides are wrong. The first side is that I think it's wrong for Blizzard to unfairly penalize PvP players. And I am not the kind of person that believes that PvPers should be punished for their past transgressions because it's affected PvE play. And it has. PvP play has affected PvE in the past, and raiders don't like it. But that doesn't mean that it's okay to get your own back on them. I'm not going to revel in the suffering of PvP players. This is not a Schadenfreude situation. What good does it do to me? How does it help the game for PvPers to be punished and then PvEers to turn around and say, ha ha! You know, bloody Nelson approach to balance. It doesn't. It doesn't help in any way. And it's dumb and incredibly stupid if you think that way. I'm sorry, but you are a petulant, mewling little bitch if you act in that way. You are! What other way can you possibly explain it? La-di-da, getting your own... Bloody hell, are you 12 years old? This is not getting your own back on your sister who stole your candy, for God's sake. This is about game balance and the welfare and enjoyment of 12 million people! It is beyond your simple, immature attitude. So, they can go to hell. But Blizzard also needs to get into their head that actually, what you are hearing from people celebrating this, it's all BS. You know, it is all spiteful, malicious BS. Ignore it. It is a vocal minority. Raiders do not think this way. Raiders don't care. Why would we? Why do we care about PvP content? We don't. That's why we just raid. It's a valid playstyle choice one way or the other, whether or not you be a PvPer or a PvE player. It does not matter. As long as PvP gear has no bearing on PvE content, as long as we do not go back to the old school ways of... Yeah, I can think of a few ways, yeah. Go back to vanilla and go back to a bit of TBC as well, where more often than not you found arena gear and you found honor gear in dungeons. God, I remember doing Molten Core and our highest DPS guy was a High Warlord, using PvP sets. Of course, that has now pretty much been changed, and you cannot do that anymore. Perhaps with the exception of the weapons that are amazing, but the armor sets are not suitable for high-end PvE play, so why should I care if somebody gets PvE gear? PvP, in fact, yes. And uses it in PvE, because that's just silly. Nobody would do that. So that's irrelevant. However, I also don't agree with the people that are treating PvP like it's a chore. If you are only playing PvP to acquire items, then you are doing it wrong. I'm sorry, disregard fun, acquire perps? No. No, 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 no. That is not how video games work. And if they do, then we have entered a dark, dark age in gaming. I cannot think of anything more insipid, and anything indeed more insidious than the idea that you can actually replace fun with virtual rewards. That it is okay. I'm sorry, that's how jobs work. That is the reason that we work jobs we don't like, because we are rewarded. It's the only reason that we work those jobs. The only reason. And entertainment should not work that way. Entertainment should not be a McDonald's job. We're talking about, say, a job that you take because you don't have a choice. You must pay the rent. You must feed yourself. You need money. Entertainment is not supposed to work that way. Now, I have to wonder whose fault this is. Is it Blizzard's fault because the PvP system is just not fun enough? Or is it the player's fault for getting obsessed with the idea that all that really matters is the progression of your virtual character with virtual items? To the expense of fun. That you view arena play as boring. I think that's the reason I like Bloodline Champions, because there are no item rewards, there is no progression. I enjoy Bloodline Champions because it's a fun arena game, and the actual combat gets me thrilled. And if WoW is not giving you that pleasure, I have to ask you, why are you still playing it? I am very confused as to your attitude there. Why would you do something like this? That's what gets to me. That, I think, is what bothers me more so than anything else. This entire sordid affair just reveals that people's attitudes towards elements of this game are completely and totally wrong. I understand ends justifying the means. I really, really do when it comes to MMOs. And you're gonna have an element of that. But if that's all your play is, if all your play involves when you log in is going into an arena that you do not enjoy doing, an activity you do not like, in order to gain items which at the end of the day are totally unfulfilling and only help you do an activity better that you didn't like to begin with, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Please explain this to me, because this is beyond my mere mortal comprehension. My name is TotalBiscuit, you are listening to Blue Plz right here on cynicalbrit.com. When we come back after the break, we'll be talking about other stuff, probably 4.2 content as far as I'm concerned. And in the meantime, I am going to play you some music. The question is what? I think I'll play you 2 tracks. Something nice and short. Now, this track no doubt will contain some strong language. It's by a band called Superjoint Ritual, and it's called Stupid, Stupid Man. Enjoy. So yeah, I'm pretty quiet on Vent, you know? Kinda laid back.
Oh my god, you noobs! DPS the ends!
Just like to chill out, kick back, relax, raid with my friends. No worries, no stress.
How is that even possible? Are you 7 different shades of stupid? Move out of the fire!
It's important to make sure my orders come through loud and clear. I'm a bit, well, shy. I'm not particularly loud or anything. My last event server was really poor quality.
Tank it, for heaven's sakes! Tank it! How can you be so monumentally freaking terrible?
Well, I discovered UGT Ventrilo servers. Amazing quality, great prices, and they're so reliable. It was perfect in every way. I mean, I was a pretty calm guy before, and now I've got even less reasons to worry.
Why? Why do I raid with you people?
Why not get one of your own? UGTservers.com. That's UGTservers.com. you'll be glad that you did. It's really helped me find my zen, you know? Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned into Blue Plz right here on cynicalbrit.com. Yes, you are. With myself, TotalBiscuit. We're talking about 4.2 now. I was actually reading this amusing Rage comic. They've started using Rage comics to teach simple tasks. For instance, I had no idea how acupuncture worked. I now do, thanks to Rage Comics. I have no idea if this is actually accurate, but it's kind of neat nonetheless. It's like, I suppose that makes sense. I don't know whether I should actually trust r/foo in order to teach me science, but I would like to believe this is how it works. And I will not believe anything else. I refuse! Unless you prove otherwise. Yes, it's a pretty awesome comic. I like that. Why can I not see anything? Because it's a radio show and it has been for the last 6 years and it's written on the page and you're a dumbass if you think otherwise. Average IQ base in my subscribers. Hopefully higher than I think. Okay. Let's have a look-see, shall we? So, what we're going to be talking about is the current state of 4.2. Now, to me, this is a lot of positive stuff, and you're going to see a lot of this on Azeroth Daily as well. So, this is kind of a precursor to Azeroth Daily. If you're listening live, and if you listen to the podcast, you probably already know about this. And this is the fact that they're actually dumping a ton, and I do mean a ton of information out about what's going to be in 4.2, and it's actually real previews as well. I mean, they've put out, 2 videos already, and that was a day after the release of 4.1, which I think was an act in order to reassure people that actually there would be good content following it up, and I'm okay with that. I think that's a great idea. We've got stuff like the Firelands in terms of its daily hub. We've got a legendary engagement, which is all about the legendary staff, and we've also got daily quest hubs in the Molten Front and the regrowth of Hyjal, as they're called. So, we know pretty much most of the names of the bosses in the Firelands. Obviously, we already knew about Ragnaros, and a lot of people had figured out that Staghelm was going to be one of them. What they didn't know was the fact that he's actually a major domo now, so that's pretty cool. And there's a bunch of other stuff as well, like there's going to be some kind of fire spider, there's a flame walker in there that looks like he's trying to charge his laser by the looks of it. Having a look at this screenshot right there, it's kind of scary, really. I'm going to put this out on the IRC channel so people can actually see it. Let's have a look at that, folks. Have a look at what I've just linked. And you'll just see it. It's like, I'm charging my laser! And stop that. Stop it at once. So, that's a lot of information, and what I would divine from this, and I haven't watched the BlizzCast yet, by the way, I haven't had the chance, that'll probably give me a lot more cool information. I'll probably discuss that in the next week's show. What I'm divining from this is that this is probably going to be one of the most story-driven patches we've ever seen. Now, the question is, what is it compared to? I mean, if we have a look at, say, vanilla content, Blackwing Lair patch, pretty much no story there whatsoever. Molten Core patch, pretty much no story there whatsoever. The pre-quests and things for that were bare minimum. You learned very little about the Molten Core by going through the pre-quest for it. You learned a bit more about Onyxia, I would say, but not a hugely story-driven set of quests. Blackwing Lair, meh. I think probably the most story-driven things they did were Naxxramas and Anchorage and Vanilla, and I don't know how much you really learned about Anchorage, honestly, from the pre-quests and things like that. I don't think they were really all that effective in telling the story. I think the only thing people really learned about Anchorage is that apparently they need an awful lot of goddamn Peace Bloom to open that door. Well, that doesn't make any sense. We're going to make a giant freaking key out of Peace Bloom? I have no idea. Not a sodding clue. So, what about TBC? not an awful lot there either, really. I mean, you had 2.1, which actually had a ton of questing content, but it had nothing to do with the storyline. Nether Drakes? Ogrelar? No. Sketis? No. Barely had any relevance to the overarching storyline of that particular expansion, so pretty much irrelevant, as far as I'm concerned. Pretty much irrelevant. What about Wrath of the Lich King? Ulduar? Not an awful lot of pre-quest leading up to that. Argent Tournament stuff, quite a lot more there, because of the Argent Tournament setup. ICC actually had some dungeons telling a bit of story there, which I think was a really great way of doing things. Now, in terms of Cataclysm, what we're looking at is the idea of introducing you to various different storylines and intertwining storylines with raid content in a way that hasn't really been done before, at least as far as I can tell. I like the fact that they're expanding the legendary questline, for instance, into something really fully fledged. They're saying this is going to be a really, really big quest, and I'm very, very, very cool with that, I might add. I think that's an excellent idea. Absolutely stellar, astonishing, awesome thing to do. Big fan, folks. Big fan. Now, the question is, I suppose, is it acceptable to release a patch that only has a single raid dungeon in it and is focusing on all of the story-based stuff? I don't want to talk about that too much because it kind of overlaps with what I'm going to be talking about in the next section, which is going to be why 7 bosses just isn't enough, and the optimum number of raid bosses, which was a quote actually from Bashiok earlier that stated the optimum number of raid bosses that they've come down to being 7, which to me seems okay, but still. I think I actually kind of like the fact that they're really going for it when it comes to the questing content, because if anything, I think Cataclysm is the one expansion that made a convert out of me when it came to questing content. And what it did was, it proved that I could enjoy quests again, which I couldn't do in anything else. Yep. Not a smidge. Not a thing. Not a thing. I hated questing content all the way up to this expansion. I think Wrath gave me a little bit of hope. You know, I enjoyed that much more because I felt it was a much, much more dynamic situation. It worked much better. But in terms of the rest of it, no. Not even close. I found questing content to be lackluster. I found it to be particularly dull. In this case, what they've got are these follow-ups, and this is perhaps what I like the most. Because of the addition of phased content, what you can do is you can put in these follow-ups to things that you had to do, that you might actually be interested in, because you want to see how the story ends. Now, since you were able to drive them out of Hyjal and win the boss, wow, what the hell am I saying? Win the fight against Ragnaros in Hyjal and do all of that stuff, to have a set of follow-up quests whereby there's this healing thing going on, and yet there's apparently this powerful, and I do mean this powerful new Twilight dude that is coming in and doing all sorts of things. And there's another follow-up as well, the idea that a Twilight dude has actually cast Thrall into 4 different pieces into the elemental planes, kind of Triforce-y sort of thing. I'm not really sure how exactly they justify that one, but hey. I think the quest is called Elemental Bonds. So, this is a big deal. I mean, this is the kind of storyline advancement that we haven't actually seen before. And then we have, of course, retarded people in the chat. Before going to 4.2, fix 4.1. What's wrong with 4.1? How about fixing 4.1 before we go all gung-ho? Do you think the people that design these things are the same people that do bug fixes? Are you absolutely out of your bloody mind? It's like, we're going to write a little bit of lore. Oh my god, lore writers, why are you not fix bugs? I don't know, maybe because they're not bloody programmers, you insufferable twat. I hate the community sometimes. I really, really do. Let's announce some preview content. Why? And this is really whining. That's what it is. This is really what whining is. As opposed to what other people claim is QQ. It's like, valid criticism about the state of the game. Oh, okay, right. Well, that's whining. No, this is actually whining. It's like, a bunch of cool new previews for upcoming content came in with no actual time frame and no indication of how much of the development team's resources are actually being used on it. Why? Oh my god, 4.1! What the hell is wrong with 4.1? There's barely anything wrong with it. There's the whole thing about the PvP, and that's pretty much about it. Have a look at it. If there were actually any real problems with 4.1, it would already be in the popular topics section on the forums. It isn't. Popular topics include, why all the fuss about heirlooms, arena and RBG contest change, right, that's a big deal. This is a popular topic. That's something that's being discussed. The thing is, the person that makes those changes is not the same thing. It's not the same team, for God's sake. This is a guy who alters a database. This is not a guy that reskins and retextures the entirety of a zone, or creates quest content. This is not the same team. We've got this ridiculous thing. I don't even know what this is. This is a Gentleman Lady Thread number 94. This is all, I believe, some RP things, so yeah, we don't care about that. Blizzard, I would like an explanation. Yep. This was the one we were talking about earlier with the blue post. This is also about the PvP stuff. Protection Paladin no longer enjoyable. That's not an issue. Account cancelled. This topic has been deleted. Evidently that wasn't all that important. Portals in Chatrath and Dalaran. Again, something that could be very easily changed by a single guy with a database. Guys, break yourself upon my booty. Yes, thank you, Tank Cow. Allow us to veto certain RDF dungeons. Okay. And can you remember the vintage plays? These are all the popular topics over there on the US Battle.net site. So, what exactly is going on with 4.1 that is so important that needs to be fixed before they preview anything for 4.2? That would be pretty much nothing, wouldn't it? Yeah. I'm having a look at 4.1 and known issues and bug reports. How to report issues. Known issues. Using DirectX 11 with some NVIDIA drivers can cause the screen to change color. Goblins won't get their public channels on Lost Isles. The mouse cursor is displaying as a black square while moving some frames if running DirectX 11. General issues. Creatures that fly on a path will sometimes go into their standing animation while flying. Oh my god. Fix 4.1. Whine! That is the real definition of whining. That is just complaining. It's like, you may not start any patch 4.2 development of any description until you have fixed the fact that creatures that fly on a path will sometimes go into their standing animation while flying. Whine! That actually hurts my throat, man. It burns. It's like speaking some kind of demonic tongue. It's terrible. Absolutely awful idea. I mean, why? Why under any circumstances would you care about these things? Please explain. When I see a preview like this for 4.2, it doesn't exactly melt my cynical heart. But it does make me think, they're actually developing a patch that's got a real reasonable amount of content for a lot of different people, aren't they? You know, considering the amount of people that the questing content appealed to in Cataclysm. Me, a jaded raider, like the questing content in Cataclysm. Do you know how hard that is? Do you know what kind of a miracle has been accomplished there by Blizzard? Seriously. It's like selling ice to Eskimos. That's what they actually managed to do. That's scary. Now, of course, people are saying, well, what about the server instability issues? Once again, the technical team managing the servers has nothing to do with designing quests. So don't come up with that nonsense, thank you very much. God, why do people not understand this? Do they think that everybody hired by Blizzard is some multi-talented genius that can fix servers and code quests and design new classes and make concept art and record voice acting and compose epic bloody symphonies for new zones? Are you serious? Yes, I'm sorry, sir. I'm afraid that we're hiring you for the R position, but we also require you to know several different programming languages and the ability to maintain a large database. Oh, and also you need to get involved in the GM duties. What? No. You silly, silly people. Don't be dumb. For God's sake, celebrate the fact that they're actually showing some worthwhile content by the looks of it that might actually appeal to a large number of people. I'll probably do this stuff. It's alright. It looks pretty good. I like the fact they're tying it into the raid dungeon. I like the fact that there's daily quest hubs. I mean, bear in mind, the patch that I celebrated the most, which was patch 2.1, actually had 3 daily quest hubs in it. And I liked that content. I thought that was good content that appealed to a large number of people. So I am totally, completely okay about this. What I'm not okay with is the fact that there's only one raid dungeon. But once again, these are not the same people. The people that design raid encounters are not the same people that design these quests and do the art assets and things like that. So, I don't know how the resources are allocated, but I'm not going to blame those guys for maybe not putting out enough raid content. I'm going to blame them for design philosophy for this. And we'll talk about that design philosophy after the break. You are watching... No, you're not. Trollolol. You are listening to Blue Plz right here on CynicalBrit.com. I'll be right back after this to talk about whether or not 7 bosses is really enough for 6 months. We'll find out. In the meantime, I shall play some music, as has been known to happen every now and again on this particular show. I think some Nocturnal Rites is what we'll be looking at right here. I'm going to call this Our Wasted Days. Be right back after this. Enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, you're tuning in to Blue Plz right here on CynicalBrit.com with myself, TotalBiscuit. So, let us talk Firelands, shall we? The main problem that I have with Firelands is not that it is too small. In fact, I'm okay with it being 7 bosses. I just want to point this out. I think this is perhaps the most valid thing about what Blizzard said so far, is that things like ICC and things like Ulduar were too bloody big. And I've said this for years, in fact. Ever since Ulduar came out, I've always said, why did it have to be one dungeon? Why did they have to develop this one 14-boss dungeon with multiple hard modes and nonsense like that, when they could have developed a smaller dungeon that was, of course, higher quality and people got sick of less quickly? Because, hey, a 14-boss dungeon has tons of trash. Nobody likes trash. Nobody! I'm sorry, I have not found a single person that enjoys trash. If there is such a person, please point him out to me immediately so he can be ostracized in front of a live audience. Oh, yes. It scares me, folks. It terrifies me that somebody would think that way. But the most important thing is the fact that this particular dungeon stands alone. And to the best of our knowledge, is the only dungeon on this tier of raiding. If this is the case, and this is the only dungeon on this tier of raiding, then... oh dear. Bad. So let's talk about why. So, because of the badge system, and the badge system is the root of most evils, folks, and pretty much you can blame everything for the badge system. If you have a bad back, it's probably the badge system. Your girlfriend dumped you. Well, that was probably the badge system. Actually, that's probably more true than you might think. You got hit by a car in the middle of the street and ended up crippled in hospital. Yes, in fact, it was the fault of the badge system. Earthquakes, plagues, famines, lightning bolts from the sky striking random children playing with balloons in the middle of a storm, which is not a very smart thing to do, but still. The badge system. The badge system is at fault. What is the badge system? I don't know. I just started a cataclysm. All I see is points. They're still badges, damn it! They're just badges in little pieces. They're little jigsaw badges. You put them together. Trying to hide the fact that they're badges by making them points. I will not be fooled by your flippantry, Blizzard. Absolutely not. No, no, no. You can't fool me. I see what you're playing at. Yeah. I actually kind of like ray trash. Yeah, but you have an anime avatar. Go away. So, what's up with 7 bosses? Well, there's a few problems. One of them, and in fact the main one I'd have to say, is actually the fact that the badge system exists. So, the way that the badge system works is that you will be getting conquest points for doing 5 mans More to the point, you won't actually be getting conquest points because they've actually changed it around. You will be getting justice points, but all of the old conquest gear will become justice gear. That's how it's going to be. It will move down to the previous tier. Because they don't want the system where they've got 4 or 5 different kinds of badges. Which, to be fair, I'm okay with, but still. That's a purely mechanical change. I need to find the conquest items. Needless to say, I don't own any of them because I haven't really played much since beta. But let me find them. Emblems of Conquest. Where is the Conquest Points vendor? That's Emblems of Conquest, not Conquest Points, for God's sake. I am finding it. I will have a look at this. Well, that's where they are. Where the hell is the list of the Conquest gear? Kind of terrified. I can't find them. That's sad. Whatever the case. Conquest gear is pretty much raid level gear. Yeah, right now, anyway. It is the level of current raiding gear. That's what it was designed for. That's what it always was designed for. Sorry, yeah, Valor. That's what I'm talking about. Frickin' Valor. God, I keep getting mixed up between the two. I'm thinking of Old War, because Old War, of course, has had Badges of Conquest, which were then followed by Badges of Triumph, which were then followed by Badges of Frost. Emblems of Frost, in fact. And then Valor points were the ones for the level 20, well, the 25-man Naxxramas kind of gear. 7.5, was it? Yes. And then Heroism was the one before that. That's how it used to work. My god, this is confusing. He really is. This is terrifying, I'm sorry. Easy to get confused between the things. Whatever the case, I can tell you for a fact that Valor Point gear is item level 359, which is raid level gear, and there's quite a lot of it. So, what is going to happen when they move on to the next tier, which will be 4.2, unless they decide suddenly that they're not going to do anything of the sort, then all of that 359 gear is getting bumped down to... Is it Justice now? Yes, I believe it's Justice. Or whatever the hell it is. Or is it Heroism? It's one of the two. Heroism or Justice. I think it's Heroism. But you get the point. It's getting bumped down to the lower tier. That's the main issue. So you'll be able to get this stuff from running pretty much any heroic 5-man. And we're not just talking about what you get now with the dailies. We're talking about the ability to just run heroic 5-mans for a day and get tons and tons of this stuff. So, honestly, that's problematic. Is it Justice? No, it's not Justice anymore. That's sad. I remember that. So, you've got a situation where you can get item level 359 gear from doing 5-mans. Now, there was a situation where this happened before, and it was called Tier 9. Do you remember why Old War died? I do, and this is the problem I've got. Blizzard has this mistaken idea as to why Old War died. They think Old War died because the next tier of content came out too early. This is nonsense. Absolute, complete, and total nonsense. Old War did not die for that reason. Hell, it was hardly replaced by anything worthwhile, was it? Oh, well, you know this really good raid dungeon that is arguably one of the best we've ever put together with plenty of epic quests and non-binary hard modes and stuff like that? Well, you know what? People just prefer to do this 5-boss arena thing, which is perhaps the most boring, lackluster piece of awful raid content we've ever devised. In fact, I think it was a special punishment for players. I can think of no other good reason to put something like this together. It's not good, is it? No, it's not. It's not good. Oh, my. So, that was not the reason. The reason people abandoned it was because they could get equivalent level gear, or even better, from running 5-man dungeons. We're talking about... It was, you know, I was saying this back in the day. It's like, why is it that you can get this from running Utgard Keep? That was really the argument. It's like, I'm running Utgard Keep and I'm getting raid level gear. I'm getting gear that is better than the stuff that I get from Yogg-Saron. What? Why does this make any sense? It doesn't. And it's the same problem right here. Now, at least I'm okay with the fact that you only get item level 353 from running the new 5-mans. That's alright. And people say, oh, the new 5-mans are really challenging. No, they're not. Are you serious? Before they nerfed them a bit, in the PTR, we ran them with 4 people without any idea what we were doing, and we steamrolled pretty much everything, with the exception of one guy. We one-shot everything. You saw the video, for God's sake. You saw the video. The second off last boss, we one-shot it with 4 people. Think of how dumb this is. Think of how stupid, unbelievably stupid that is. It's not hard. So, the concern to me is that they'll bring out a 7-boss dungeon and they will obsolete everything else. Of course, the alternative argument, and of course there is a counterpoint to this, there always is, there is a possibility that in fact, that's not what will happen. There is a possibility that what might happen is that more people will be encouraged to go and do heroic content, as a result of having then better gear, and then they'll go back into the older dungeons and do the heroic stuff. That's the other possibility. However, here's the problem, and this is what I was leading into. Is the heroic content really, really different content? This was part of this thread on MMO Champion, and one guy said something that absolutely boggled my mind as to how stupid it was. I could not think of a single reason why anyone would believe this. I made the point in response to somebody saying, well, heroic content is not as good as brand new content, by saying, exactly, playing through a game, a 6-hour game, once on normal and once on hard does not make it a 12-hour game. And somebody says, yeah, it does. 6 plus 6 equals 12. You played it twice, so it's a 12-hour game. Okay. So, excuse me for 1 second. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to pick up this book right here. A bit of light reading that I picked up. Sergei how the hell do you pronounce this? Lukyanenko. It's called The Twilight Watch. No, it's not Twilight. It's part of the Night Watch series, which is really good. Now, this book is, let's see, it's not very long. It's 450 pages. So, if I choose to read this book twice, while wearing sunglasses in the dark to make it significantly more difficult to read, is this a 900-page book? No! It's not a 900-page book! Don't be ridiculous. And I know that's a silly example, because the book, of course, will never change. But playing the same game twice through doesn't make it a double-length game. It's nice that the option is there, and it's nice that some people can enjoy that, but I would say the majority of people don't play a single-player game twice on different difficulty levels. And I would like to refer to the fact that according to recent Valve stats, less than half of the people that own Half-Life 2 and Portal actually beat them. And Portal isn't even a long game. I haven't beaten Portal. I actually don't care, because I don't like Portal, but still. Yes, I know, heresy. Nah! Don't like Portal. It's not my kind of game. It's not a bad game. It's just not my kind of game. What is wrong with that? I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't like sports games either. Doesn't mean they're bad games, it just means I don't want to play them. So if you have this single-player game and you play through it twice and it doesn't really change except for the fact that it gets a little bit harder, that's not really okay. I mean, are we talking about a New Game Plus mode? I think that's really it, isn't it? Because a lot of RPGs have something in them called New Game Plus, which is an option for certain people. The problem is it's only an option for certain people. I don't think the majority of people, in fact I know for a fact that the majority of people do not beat an RPG and then go into New Game Plus. They just don't do it. RPGs are too long, and RPGs are so story-driven that often they just do not care. If the same events happen, it's like, oh, well, why do I care if this is... I totally understand that. I really, really do, unless it has multiple paths. And it's not like you unlock new bosses by going in there, with the exception, of course, of Sinestra. There's only one boss, and this actually kind of annoys me, because they claimed before Cataclysm came out that they wanted to put in one hard mode only boss in each dungeon. They didn't. They only put it in one, and there won't be a hard mode only boss in Firelands either. So they have completely just run aground in terms of that promise. So what you have the option of doing when we get 4.2, which I'd be willing to put £50 down right now on the fact that 4.2 will probably come out in about 2 months. Yeah? I think that's it. That's the most vitally important thing. It matters, doesn't it? In my opinion, certainly. Now, I'd just like to point out something that some people did actually say. And that's the idea that, well, putting in this dungeon and only being 7 bosses is fine because of that heroic stuff. And I just want to say to people, look, not everyone thinks the way that you think. And I have to wonder just how much of this WoW progress stuff actually indicates difficulty, and how much of it actually indicates the fact that these guys just don't care. And that's the most concerning thing. As we have a look at some stats, yeah? The most killed boss in the game right now is actually Magmor from the normal mode, which is 94.94% of active raiding guilds have killed this boss. So, 52,000 guilds. So, even if we were to say times that by 10 for 10 people, that's 500,000 players. And of course, it's more than that, we know that. I'd like to point out the difference between the first kill in there and with the first kill in the heroic modes, and then going onwards. Because if we look at the first kills here, we look at, say, Magmor, it's got 52,000 kills. The most killed heroic boss is Harfus Wormbreaker at 13,000, and then you have a massive drop, 2,500 guilds. That's only 4.57 of actives have killed Valiona and Thuralion, which is the second one, and there's not even a lot of trash between the two, really. If you look at Magmor, for instance, an Omnitron Defense System, and Meloriac and Atramides, they're all on about 5,000 each, with Omnitron Defense System being actually less than Valiona and Thuralion. Then Ascending Council's only got 316 people killing it. 316 guilds, that's actually, that doesn't make any sense, because according to that, Cho'Gall's got more than that. How the hell does that work? I don't think you can bypass Ascending Council, so obviously the stats are wrong there, but whatever the case. If you have a look at those rough stats, does that indicate a massive difficulty gap, or does it actually indicate that people don't care? And they try the first boss and they kill it, and they're like, you know what, actually, we don't care. We really, really don't want the hassle of doing these bosses again with extra bells and whistles. And I think that's the problem with stats, isn't it? Nobody knows. Nobody knows whether or not people quit because of difficulty, or people quit because they actually just don't care about heroics. And I think that's maybe going to be the biggest problem going forward for the next year or two of content, that Blizzard has no idea whether or not people actually give a damn about heroic content. How will they find out? I don't know. I really don't. It would have to be a survey situation. But whatever the case, that is something that really, really concerns me, and honestly, I don't think that having a 7 boss dungeon as your only dungeon in tier 12 or whatever we're currently on is a really healthy thing to do. My name is TotalBiscuit. You are listening to the one and only Blue Plz right here on cynicalbrit.com. We'll be right back after this with the illusion of choice, and I'm going to play you something, certainly. What shall I play you? A bit of Dream Evil, maybe? Bit of cheese. Anyone a fan of cheese? I like cheese. I'm a massive fan of cheese. I got cheese earlier. Actually, Foregate doesn't really count as cheese. I don't like it anyway. Made of metal. Yes, we'll be back after this with the illusion of choice. Enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, the illusion of choice. So I had a couple of emails coming in over the same sort of topics. I'm going to meld these together. We had one from Simon Hubler, and we had one from Lucat. So Lucat said, "Hey TV, due to the new heroic dungeons giving away epic items, do you think that Blizzard will eventually repeat the Days of Wrath, which will eventually put the game at a point where people will be full purple geared when dinging max levels after 2 days, as well as not doing any of the first and second tier raids? Also, you mentioned on there that you would like the whole idea of bringing back old content, but in previous Blue Plz episodes you clearly stated you don't like the idea. What you want is new content instead of going back to instances you already did. What made you change your mind?" Well, for one thing, I didn't change my mind on that. I'm okay with them bringing back old content as long as it is not a substitute for new stuff. That's the thing. I'm alright with them rehashing stuff as long as it is not a substitute. And the idea of 4.1, for instance, where is the Abyssal Maw? Where is it? Somebody tell me where the Abyssal Maw is, because that was supposed to come in 4.1. That was that 5-man dungeon. They promised repeatedly to bring us the Abyssal Maw, and they didn't do it. They said, we're going to bring you new 5-mans every major content patch. They didn't do it. They brought us old 5-mans. In fact, old raids converted into 5-mans. That's the problem I've got with it. It's only when it's done right, and when it's done alongside new content, as opposed to as an excuse for it. That's the thing, really, isn't it? I mean, if we see the Firelands coming in 6 months, maybe even 7 months after game launch, which is looking likely, then that would be the most time we have ever gone without a raid dungeon from a launch of a expansion or indeed the vanilla game. That's the most, by far. Because, of course, the most we've ever gone is 6 months with Old War. I think we got the first one within about 4.5 months on TBC. We got 2 full-size raid dungeons for that, as well as all the other cool stuff. With vanilla, I can't remember when that was, but with vanilla, I suppose it's even a special case as well, because of course you had 60 levels to go through, and it was quite slow back then, so I don't think it was really such a big deal. But that's the problem I've got with it. If it somehow holds up or is used as a substitute or an excuse for not developing new content, then that makes it bad. If it's done properly and it's used to supplement new content, sure, absolutely. It's not a situation where I absolutely don't want them ever to rehash old content ever. It's got to be done in the right way. That's my concern. However, the main question is what you've got right here, which also was shared by the other guy, who was asking whether or not Kata babies are worse than Wrath babies, and we might get into a similar situation with badge gear. Well, here's my concern, right? Right now, you're in a situation where you cannot get any kind of armor gear, with the exception of, I think, feet, back, trinkets, rings, and some other thing, without getting tokens. If you have a look at the vendor for this, you will see that. The Valor Point list of items. You'll see what's available. Now, right now I'm okay with that. You know, that's supplementary material. This is actually the way the Justice Points used to be. If you remember Justice Points back in TBC, what you could get with Justice Points was... let me try and remember. It was mostly offhands and cloaks and rings and things like that. It was very specific as well, like you get a fire offhand and stuff like that. Obviously you don't do that anymore. My concern is that they will take away the requirement for those tokens, because they have already said, oh, well, we don't want people going back in those old dungeons. We don't want to force people to go back into old content to do new content. This is their attitude, which to me seems ridiculous. Because the problem I have with it is that once you actually get people going and they get into the game, you assume that all they want to do is the latest and greatest. When in reality, what you've got is all this content that you've just made obsolete, that they could do and be perfectly entertained by. And they'll also miss out on a ton of good dungeon content. For instance, the raid content in Cataclysm is actually good. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It is actually good content. It is well designed. There are some really fun fights in there. There are some challenging fights in there, even on normal. And normal Nefarian has still only been done by, what, 25% of raiding guilds? It's held up pretty well, considering what happened in Wrath, whereby all the content was beaten in 3 days. I mean, even against the hardcore guilds, the normal mode content lasted longer than that, and it took them less time to level up. Think about that. That's really impressive, actually. That is really, really impressive. So, yeah, the content that we have right now is pretty good. I don't see why anyone would not want to do that content. And this is the problem I've got with the badge system. If, and I do mean only if, they actually stick to their guns and ensure that the armor items, i.e. the tier items that you can get from the combination of badges and tokens, actually stay the way that they should be, then we'll be in a really great situation. The thing is, and the problem is, this is what happened at the start of Wrath. Yeah? They only allowed you to get like 2 pieces of the tier items just from buying it with badges. The rest had to be got with tokens. And then they changed that. And the change was made with Tier 9 onwards. You could get the entirety of the Tier 9 set, and of course the entirety of the Tier 10 set. You get an upgraded set by getting tokens, which was cool, but you could get this in the entirety of this set by simply running 5-mans. That's where I have the problem. Now, right now, you cannot fill up all of the slots, as someone accurately pointed out, by just getting Valor Point gear. You have to go and get tokens as well. But my concern is the fact that you will be able to do that at some point. And I think they will do it. It seems very, very likely. It seems really likely that they will actually allow that. Now, I have to wonder what exactly you can really do to fix that. and I've made some suggestions before. Here's the internal bind, the eternal problem. It's almost a catch-22. So, players that have done content to death don't want to repeat it. Okay, that's cool, that's acceptable. However, new players have to do it, and alts have to do it. That's a problem. Because you can't gear an alt up without, say, doing the content already. Now, I think the way to fix this is actually BOA items, by not account. I think you should be able to get what are effectively raiding heirlooms that can be traded between characters. And the only way you can get them is by getting tokens from the dungeons which have that kind of item level. Say, for instance, you want heirlooms, they're item level 359, and these only work on max level characters. I'm not saying these work, these don't scale. These are just BOA items. They're not really heirlooms, they're just BOAs, so you can transfer them to anyone on your account. So, you have to get, if you want an item level 359, then you've got to get tokens from item level 359 content in order to build these things. And you can even have quests associated with building these sets of items. I don't know what they could be called, but hey, they're just sort of pseudo-heirlooms. Now that solves the alt problem. Not only does it give people another reason to do the content a bit more, but it also means that they're not running into problems with boosting. You're not having to boost a bunch of players. You can just do this in the meantime, and honestly, I think you could add these tokens in with the existing raids, so you actually get these in addition. Maybe you earn some kind of points that would allow you to purchase this gear. Something like that. That would make sense. I don't really see the need to do old content and multiple characters. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think if you've already done the content, and you want to gear up an alt, then you should be able to do that aside from that. Now, some might say, well, you can do this already. You're right, you can do this already. Sort of, by using the badge system. The problem is that the badge system has a bunch of other effects on it as well. And the badges are acquired not by doing raids, they are done by doing 5-mans, and this is the big difference between it. If the only place you could earn badges, even if they were BOA, hell, that's even a simpler solution, just make all the badges BOA for God's sake. But if the only way you could earn those badges, those high-level badges, was actually by doing raid content, and not by what you're doing right now, which is by doing daily dungeons, then, and only then, would I not have a problem with it. And that would work, that would be fine. And that would also solve the problem of, oh, well, how do you gear up alts? Well, you do it the same way you did before, you just prevent people from doing it that way. Hell, maybe give people more badges. But only make them drop and be acquired in raid dungeons and not in 5-mans. It's a possibility. This used to be the way of things, by the way. Back at the start of Wrath, you only used to be able to get Valor emblems from actually running raid content. They brought in these daily quests. I think it was around the time of TOC, in fact. That's where everything started to go horribly wrong. Yeah, it was. You were able to do daily dungeon runs for things at that point, but you couldn't do them before that. They were actually in the form of quests as well. They weren't even built into a dungeon finder. Dungeon finder only came in with the ICC patch. So, it seems to me that we could be getting back into a situation. I mean, it's following the same pattern that Wrath did. That's what worries me. It doesn't mean that it will, but I just find it very, very likely that either in the next couple of tiers, they will just say, you know what, you can just have the full set, or they will remove the token requirements from the tier set in the next patch, or something like that, and then we're just back to how it was. And that causes all manner of problems, and you know how it goes. We're talking about people requiring massive gear score for running 5-man dungeons. We're talking about the same kind of things that happened in Wrath. We saw those effects firsthand. You can't ignore them. That was caused by an unreasonable gear requirement, because gear was so easy to get. People had these ridiculous requirements, like, oh, you want to run 5-mans with me? You better have gear score 5,500 or whatever. You better be in full epics to run this 5-man content. And that actually shuts down newer players worse than just not giving them a means to acquire this gear that way at all. That's the thing. That's the mistake that Blizzard have made. If you think about it for a second, it makes perfect sense. It's as simple as that. Players put in these massive and I do mean massive barriers, in front of newer players because of the badge system. The badge system doesn't actually help new players gain gear, it actually prevents them from doing just that, because everything you do in this game is also a social engineering exercise. Whether it's deliberate or not, it will change the attitude of the player base. Blizzard has got to realize this. How many times do you have to see this happen before you realize this, Blizzard, that people will actually act differently depending on how the game works in terms of its mechanics? Loot distribution changes people's attitude to the way the game works and their fellow players. Please figure this out as quickly as possible. Once you do that, we'll have a better game. You've been listening to Blue Plz right here on CynicalBrit.com. We've got a shout-out segment for the next few minutes of the show, folks. Yes, indeed, the next few minutes of the show. Send it in. Send it in. TheMurloc@gmail.com. That is TheMurloc@gmail.com. Or you can send in a tweet if you so desire. Twitter.com/TotalBiscuit. Twitter.com/TotalBiscuit. Or, if you like, you could, of course, throw it in there and send me a message via IRC. Do it, folks. Do it. Shout-out time. Here we go. Shout-out to Pathala for sending in 84.6 ounces of Korean shrimp crackers to Medaron in the mail. That's a lot of shrimp crackers, I think. I'm not entirely sure how much that actually is. A shout-out to iKing for being alive again. That's from Silly Lord. Congratulations. Give NetherRealm a shout-out for Mortal Kombat. Damn right, such a good game. And, well, I'd like to give an anti-shout-out, by the way, to the PlayStation Network. Thanks for getting rid of all of our personal information. I guess we just didn't need that anywhere. Ah. That's nice credit card information you have there. It would be a shame if something were to happen to it. Die, Sony. A shout out to the Alliance and Twilight's Hammer EU for all the awesome Battleground wins over the past few months. You guys have certainly destroyed the image that the Alliance are incompetent. But they are. They are incompetent. A shout out to iKing for being a self-centered mod in the Cynical IRC. Well, la-di-da. Oh my. A shout out to XS, Poro, iKing, and Miku for idling fun. A shout out to Valve for releasing Portal 2, one of the best puzzle games ever. I wouldn't know, I was too busy whining, apparently. Why you not do this? That was more whining I was going to say. Whine! Wheatley. Oh my god, why you not pick Wheatley up? Because I'd like to show you some voice acting that you never heard before. Whine! It's not real! Oh my god. A shout out to the Roll Dice Guild on Medivh US from Itachi. Good looking hard modes, 1 out of 12, more to add soon. I think we're on like 8 out of 12 and Trollface. Nyadi-da. Are we good? It's pretty awesome. Yes, I know credit card information was encrypted. I don't care, they've still got my damn personal information. I'm getting spam. A shout out to the Cynical Brit IRC mod for exterminating 99% of idiots. A shout out to Trollface.jpg for their continued raid progress. And a shout out to Marvel vs. Capcom 3 for being so much bloody fun to spectate. That's from Blue Sparks. A shout out to Vinny Vici for being an awesome raiding guild, fun of fun people on the Echo Isles. That's from Zalthorian. A shout out to TotalBiscuit for being entertainingly disgruntled. That's what I do, folks. That is pretty much my modus operandi. An anti-shout out to Blizzard for bad content in the 0.1 patch. Indeed. Indeed. What else have we got? A shout out to something. Villains on Vacation for being such a good guild. And a shout out to Jonas for being awesome. That's from Ollie Ollison. Okay, folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching. Ha-ha. Trollolol. I'll just keep doing this, keep pretending that it's some kind of crazy secret video show that only premium subscribers get to access. That'll probably cause me more trouble than it's worth. I'm out of here, folks. Thank you very much. Good night.